The laughter echoed through the office long after I had stopped pretending to smile. It wasn't the kind of laughter that came from a joke. It was sharper, crueler, designed to sting. My name was trending on the company's internal chat, attached to a meme someone had made using my ID photo. Micah, proof that HR doesn't check personality during hiring. It read. They thought it was funny. I didn't. I tried to focus on my monitor, the numbers blurring together in my spreadsheet. My throat felt tight, my chest heavier with each passing second. The post had started as a harmless prank, according to my coworker Dylan, who apparently found joy in humiliating me online. The comments underneath were worse, snickering emojis, gifs, people tagging others to join in. That's when I heard his voice. Enough! Cut through the noise like a blade. Nate. He stood a few desks away, leaning against the partition, arms crossed casually but eyes burning with something fierce. Nate, the office flirt. The guy who made even the interns blush when he winked at them. The one who walked through the building as if he owned every room he entered. Everyone went silent. Dylan laughed awkwardly. Chill, man. It's just a joke. Nate's gaze didn't waver. A joke's supposed to make people laugh. He's not laughing. My heart hammered. I hadn't spoken to Nate much beyond small talk at the coffee machine. He was charming, confident, everything I wasn't. Why was he suddenly defending me? Dylan muttered something and walked off. The room went back to its fake productivity hum. But something had shifted. Nate glanced at me once more before turning away, his expression unreadable. I should have felt grateful. Instead, I felt exposed. That night, I scrolled through my phone, staring at the post that had already made its way onto a few private Slack groups. The comments were relentless. I wanted to delete my account, to disappear. Instead, I opened my messages and saw one notification. From Nate. Subject: Don't let them win. No text, no explanation, just that line. The next morning, Nate was waiting by the elevator. Hey, he said when I stepped in. Rough night. I didn't want to admit it. I'm fine. You don't look fine. I exhaled. Thanks for earlier. You didn't have to do that. He shrugged. Yeah, I did. Watching someone get torn apart while everyone laughs? Not my thing. His voice was steady, not performative like I expected. I glanced at him, trying to read if this was just another one of his charming acts. But his eyes weren't teasing. They were tired, empathetic. Still, I said, you've got a reputation to protect. Wouldn't want to ruin your image by siding with the office loser. He grinned. I don't care what people think of me. Besides, maybe I'm just into lost causes. The elevator dinged open. He left me standing there, heartbeat unsteady. Over the next few days, Nate found reasons to talk to me. He'd swing by my desk with his coffee, lean on my chair and ask questions that had nothing to do with work. It made people stare, Dylan especially. Once, during lunch, Nate sat across from me in the cafeteria, ignoring the whispers around us. You know, he said, tearing his sandwich in half. People like Dylan only feel powerful because no one calls them out. And you? I asked. You enjoy making a scene? He smirked. Sometimes a scene's the only way to get people to listen. I rolled my eyes, but the corner of my mouth betrayed me. He noticed. There it is, he said. An actual smile. You're impossible. And yet, he leaned in, lowering his voice. You're not walking away. He was right. I didn't. It wasn't long before the rumor mill started. Someone whispered that Nate and I were getting close. Dylan overheard, of course. He posted another message on Slack. Something insinuating, cruel. Only this time, the joke wasn't just about me. It was about both of us. I froze when I saw it. The comment thread spiraled instantly. Nate saw it too. Within minutes, he was standing at Dylan's desk. Delete it. Dylan looked smug. Relax, lover boy. Everyone knows you're just playing hero. The entire department went silent. I wanted to sink into the floor, but Nate didn't back down. He stepped closer, his tone low and lethal. You think bullying makes you funny? You think hiding behind a screen makes you untouchable. He leaned over Dylan's desk. Say it again. Out loud. Dylan faltered. His grin vanished. Man, it's not that deep. Say it. No one moved. The tension was electric. Then Nate straightened, his voice calm again. That's what I thought. He turned, caught my gaze, and said just loud enough for everyone to hear. For the record, I don't care who knows I like him. The words hit me like a thunderclap. The air left my lungs. I didn't know what stunned me more, that he said it or that he meant it. People murmured. Phones subtly lifted to record. Nate ignored them all, walking away with that same confident stride. I sat at my desk, heart pounding, my mind spinning out of control. Did he just say he liked me? In front of everyone? That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying it over and over, the way he said it, the quiet certainty in his tone. No hesitation, no joke. I found myself scrolling back to his first email. Don't let them win. Maybe he hadn't been talking about Dylan at all. Maybe he'd been talking about something else, about not hiding who we were, about choosing courage over fear. When I came into work the next morning, the office was quieter than usual. Dylan had been called into HR. Someone said Nate filed a complaint, including screenshots of everything. He didn't just defend me, he stood up for both of us. Morning, Nate greeted, setting a cup of coffee on my desk. Thought you might need this. I looked up at him, uncertain. You didn't have to do that. Any of it. I wanted to, he said simply. Why? He shrugged. Because you remind me of who I used to be before I stopped pretending. His honesty disarmed me. You mean? Yeah, he said quietly. I like guys, and I'm tired of acting like I don't. My stomach flipped. There it was, the truth hanging between us, raw and unfiltered. I didn't mean to make things harder for you, I said. You didn't, he replied. You made things real. He sat on the edge of my desk, his knee brushing mine. Look, I know you've had a rough week, but you're tougher than you think, Micah. And for what it's worth, I've got your back. Always. Something in his tone made my chest ache in a good way. I didn't say anything. I just nodded. The rest of the day passed in a blur. People were cautious, their jokes gone, their laughter muted. It was as if the office itself had sobered up. But when Nate looked at me across the room, there was light again. Something unspoken but alive. That evening, as we left the building, he fell into step beside me. Dinner? He asked casually. I hesitated. Isn't that risky? After all that? He grinned. Maybe, but I've always liked risky. I laughed despite myself. You really don't care what people say, do you? Not when it's about something or someone I actually want. My pulse quickened. And what is it you want, exactly? He met my eyes, that playful spark returning. You'll find out over dinner. As we walked toward the city lights, I realized something had shifted in me too. For the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't apologizing for existing. Because someone had looked at me, not as a joke, not as a target, but as something worth defending. And somehow that made all the difference. The restaurant Nate chose was small, tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop on a quiet street. It had warm lighting and old jazz playing softly in the background. I almost turned around when I saw the intimate setup. Tiny tables, candles flickering, but Nate caught my sleeve before I could. Relax, he said, his grin easy. It's not a date, unless you want it to be. I rolled my eyes, though my face burned. You can't stop flirting for 5 minutes, can you? He shrugged, guiding me to a corner booth. Not when it works. The waiter brought water and menus, and for a few seconds we sat in silence. The air between us wasn't awkward, it was charged, like a current running under the surface. So, Nate said finally, leaning forward, how are you holding up? I sighed. I've been better. HR said they're investigating Dylan's posts. But that doesn't make it go away, you know? People still look at me differently. Like I'm fragile. He nodded slowly. You're not fragile, Micah. You're just surrounded by people who mistake kindness for weakness. I looked at him, curious. You say that like it's personal. He smiled faintly. It is. He told me about his last job, how he left because he was tired of pretending to be someone he wasn't. The jokes, the casual homophobia disguised as humor, the pressure to fit in. It ate at him until he couldn't stand it anymore. I decided I'd rather be alone than be fake, he said, his voice softer now. But then I saw you in the office. Quiet, always polite, doing everything right. And they still went after you. It pissed me off. I swallowed hard. So you decided to rescue me? Something like that, he said, eyes glinting. Except I think you might have rescued me, too. I didn't know what to say to that. My chest felt too tight, my throat too dry. The waiter returned to take our orders, breaking the tension. Dinner passed more easily than I expected. Nate was funny, open, full of stories that made me forget the weight I'd been carrying. By the time we left, I was laughing again, really laughing, for the first time in weeks. Outside, the air was cool, the city humming softly around us. Nate walked beside me, his hands in his pockets. You know, he said, you don't have to go through all this alone. I looked up at him. I'm used to being alone. Then maybe it's time to get used to it. He said it so casually, but something about his tone made me believe he meant it. We stopped at the crosswalk, the red light reflecting off his face. He turned toward me, his expression serious now. I meant what I said back there, he added. In the office. I like you. Not as a statement, not to prove anything. Just because I do. I froze. The world around us faded. The cars, the people, the sound of the city. It was just him and me. Nate, you don't have to say anything, he interrupted gently. I just needed you to know. The light turned green. We crossed the street in silence. When we reached my building, I hesitated at the entrance. You want to come up? I asked before I could stop myself. He smiled, that half smirk that always managed to disarm me. If I do, I might not want to leave. Then maybe don't. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he stepped closer, his voice low. Are you sure? I nodded. Inside, everything felt different. The apartment was dim, quiet except for the faint hum of the city outside. Nate stood near the window, looking out at the skyline. It's peaceful here, he said. It's small, I replied, but it's mine. He turned, eyes soft. You know, I think that's the first time I've seen you actually relaxed. I guess I feel safe, I said before I realized how vulnerable it sounded. His gaze deepened. Good. You deserve to. For a while, we just stood there, neither of us sure who would move first. Then he reached out, brushing his fingers lightly against my hand. It was a simple touch, but it felt like everything. When he finally kissed me, it wasn't rushed or desperate. It was slow, deliberate, full of meaning. The kind of kiss that makes you forget every cruel word, every lonely night, every time you doubted your worth. When we pulled apart, he smiled. That wasn't so bad, huh? I laughed, breathless. You talk too much. He grinned. Guilty. We ended up sitting on the couch, talking until dawn. About work, about life, about what it meant to stop hiding. Nate told me how tired he was of being the office flirt. How it was easier to play a part than risk being real. I thought if I kept everyone guessing, no one would really know me, he said. Turns out, that's just another kind of loneliness. I looked at him, feeling something stir deep inside me. I get it, I said quietly. I've been hiding in plain sight, too. He smiled faintly. Then maybe it's time we both stop. When he left that morning, he kissed my forehead and said, See you at work, hero. The nickname stuck. The next few days were different. People still whispered, but no one dared to say anything out loud. Dylan was suspended pending HR review, and for once, justice didn't feel impossible. Nate and I didn't make any announcements, we didn't need to. The way he looked at me across the office said enough. And when he brushed my hand as we passed in the hallway, it was our quiet rebellion. Our proof that kindness could still win in a place built on ego. But there was still fear in me. Fear that this wouldn't last. That the moment the world saw us as real, it would all fall apart. One afternoon, as we left a meeting together, I said, They're never going to let this go, you know? The jokes? The rumors? He stopped me with a glance. Let them talk. I've spent too much of my life worrying about what other people think. I'd rather live for something that feels honest. And what if it costs you your job? Then I'll find another one, he said simply. But I'm not losing myself again. Something in his conviction steadied me. I realized then that this wasn't just about standing up to a bully or surviving office gossip. It was about choosing authenticity, no matter how uncomfortable it made others. That night, I opened my work email and wrote a company-wide message. Subject: a word about respect. I hesitated before hitting send, my hands trembling. Then I pressed the button. In it, I didn't name names. I just wrote about what it felt like to be the target of cruelty, about how jokes can become daggers when no one speaks up. I ended it with one sentence: we all deserve to be treated like we belong. By morning, my inbox was flooded. Some messages were awkward apologies. Others were thank yous, from people I didn't even know, saying they'd been too afraid to speak up themselves. When I walked into the office, Nate was waiting at my desk, holding 2 coffees. "You're trending again," he said, smirking. "But this time for the right reason." I smiled. For once, I believed him. He handed me a cup, his hand lingering on mine. "Proud of you," he said softly. Something in his tone made my chest tighten. I looked at him, really looked at him, the confidence, the warmth, the quiet strength beneath all that charm. "You started it," I said. "You made me believe I could." He shrugged, that playful grin returning. "Guess we make a good team." And for the first time, I let myself imagine it, what it might be like if this was more than just a spark born out of chaos. What it might mean to finally be seen, and to see someone back. I didn't have the answers yet, but sitting there, coffee in hand, sunlight spilling across his face, I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't afraid anymore. The following week, the office felt different. Not entirely safe, but lighter somehow. People still whispered, still glanced over their monitors when Nate and I passed, but there was hesitation in their looks now, as if they were trying to figure out what line not to cross anymore. Nate handled it the way he handled everything, with humor and grace. He winked at the people who avoided eye contact, made small jokes in meetings, and smiled like the tension never touched him. But I could see the weariness in his shoulders, the way his smile faltered when he thought no one was looking. "You don't have to protect me all the time," I told him one afternoon as we walked back from lunch. The sun was hot, the pavement shimmering, and he looked more tired than usual. He raised an eyebrow. "Who says I'm protecting you?" I gave him a look. "You've been taking every hit for me since this started." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Maybe I'm not protecting you. Maybe I'm protecting what we've got. Because it's real, you know?" The words hit me harder than I expected. Real. It wasn't something I'd let myself think about, not fully. Not with everything that had happened. But when I looked at him, I saw it too. The reality in his eyes, the quiet steadiness of his presence. He wasn't playing a part anymore, and neither was I. That evening, as we left the office, Nate stopped at the steps outside the building. "Come with me," he said suddenly. "To where?" He just smiled. "You'll see." He drove us out of the city, past the noise and neon lights, until the skyline disappeared behind us. We ended up by the water, a quiet pier stretching into the dark, the air sharp with salt. He turned off the engine and leaned back against the hood of his car. "This is where I come when I need to think," he said softly. "Used to come here after bad days at my old job. Helps me remember that there's more to life than people's opinions." We stood there for a while, watching the waves break against the rocks. The silence between us was comfortable, like we'd already said everything that mattered. "You ever think about leaving?" I asked. "Just starting over somewhere no one knows you?" He smiled faintly. "All the time. But then I think if I keep running, I'll never have a place that feels like home. I want that, Micah. A home. Not just a space to hide in." I turned toward him, the wind tugging at my shirt. "And you think you'll find that here?" He looked at me, his gaze steady. "Maybe I already have." The world seemed to pause. The water, the wind, even the night itself. all of it held still. I didn't reply, couldn't. Instead, I stepped closer, until our hands brushed. He didn't move away. For a long time, we just stood there, staring at the horizon. Then he spoke, his voice almost a whisper. "You're the bravest person I know, Micah." I laughed quietly. "You've got a strange definition of brave. I was falling apart a week ago. And you still showed up," he said. "That's what counts." When I got home that night, I found an email from HR. Dylan's employment was terminated for harassment and breach of company policy. It felt surreal, like the ending of a battle I hadn't expected to win. But instead of relief, I just felt numb. The next morning, when I told Nate, he nodded, unsurprised. "Good. Maybe now people will think twice." "Do you ever wonder if we're next?" I asked quietly. "If being open about us could cost us everything?" He looked at me for a long time before answering. "Yeah, I wonder that every day. But you know what? I'd rather lose a job than lose the part of myself that finally feels alive." I didn't answer, but his words stayed with me. A few days later, our department was called into a company-wide meeting. The HR director stood at the front, talking about respect, inclusion, and workplace culture. It was clearly a response to everything that had happened. People nodded, some uncomfortably. When she mentioned courageous employees who reminded us what accountability looks like, several heads turned toward me and Nate. I wanted to disappear into my chair. Nate just smiled, tapping my hand under the table. After the meeting, a few coworkers came over. Some apologized, some just said hi for the first time without the awkwardness. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Later that day, Nate sent me a message. "Meet me on the roof after work." When I climbed the narrow stairs, I found him standing by the railing, the city stretching wide beneath us. He turned when he heard me. "Told you we'd make it through," he said, grinning. "Barely," I replied, walking over. "You could have warned me that being honest would feel this exhausting." He laughed. "It's not supposed to be easy, but it's worth it." He reached out, tucking a stray piece of hair behind my ear. "You know, the first time I saw you, I thought you were too good for this place." I snorted. "You thought I was boring." "Wrong," he said, smiling. "I thought you were brave in quiet ways. The kind of brave that doesn't shout. The kind that survives." The way he said it made my throat ache. "I don't know what happens next," I admitted. "Us, work, everything. It's all uncertain." He nodded. "That's life, Micah. Uncertain. But maybe that's what makes it worth living." We stood there, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. The wind tugged at his shirt, the air cool and clear. He leaned closer, voice soft. "You know what's funny? I used to flirt with everyone so no one would see who I really wanted." "And who's that?" I asked, even though I already knew. He smiled. "You." The kiss that followed wasn't tentative like the first one. It was certain, full of everything we'd held back. The fear, the relief, the hope. When we finally pulled apart, I was laughing, breathless and alive. Down below, the city buzzed with its usual chaos, unaware that something had quietly changed high above its streets. Two people had found the courage to stop pretending. That weekend, Nate and I took a drive to the coast again. No office, no stairs, no expectations. Just the sound of the ocean and the simple comfort of each other's company. We talked about dreams, his plan to start a design studio, my hope to go back to school. For once, every possibility felt open. "Do you think people can really change?" I asked, watching the waves crash. He nodded. "People can. They just need a reason to." "And what's yours?" He looked at me, a slow smile forming. "You." The world around us faded into dusk, the horizon burning orange. I realized then that what had started as humiliation had turned into something far more powerful. A chance to rebuild, to choose authenticity over fear. I wasn't the office joke anymore. I wasn't invisible. I was someone worth standing up for, someone worth loving. When Nate reached for my hand, I didn't pull away. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I felt like I was living. And that made all the difference.